Great. Good evening, friends. Welcome to the 2024 finale of the Career Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Gopal, and it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to have you all join us today. As we end 2024, many of you may already be winding down. This is the time when we reflect, taking stock of the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. I'm hoping most of you may have had a fantastic year, hitting all the goals. Some of you may not have had the year as you had planned originally. But in either case, you will be surely reflecting the big questions that are what went well, what didn't go as planned, and what could you do differently next year to make it better. When I started this podcast journey, or perhaps when I started my 2024, I couldn't have imagined that I'll be here today on the 12th December 2024 hosting this finale episode. It's a testament of how life unfolds in unexpected way, isn't it? Like many of you, I began this year with my own set of goals: health, professional, financial, and family. I actually made decent progress in most of the areas, but I'll admit I didn't do much on my health. Finding balance is hard, and it's a reminder that we are all work in progress. Through the Career Shifts podcast, I have had the privilege of hosting some extraordinary individuals this year. They've shared their victories, they've shared their vulnerable moments, their struggles, and the lessons they have learned along the way. As I reflect, I do plan to go back and revisit those episodes because each and every conversation is packed with valuable insights that can inspire change and growth. Now, let's come to today, the episode number 27, the final episode of this year. I wanted to bring in someone special, someone who's been a constant supporter, to be very honest, since day one. And let me take you back to where the connection started. A couple of years ago, I had written about my dad. Sahil reached out to me on LinkedIn and said he really liked what I had written about it. We exchanged some emails, notes, and I left my number with him. On the day one of my podcast, I just had finished the podcast, sat down, started eating my dinner, and the phone rings. And I'm like, who is this? He's like, Gopal, it was a fantastic episode, man. Great show. I was like, who is this? And he says, this is Sahil Nayar, buddy. I'm like, where did you get my number? It took me a moment to realize that we had exchanged numbers years ago. The phone call kickstarted memories, series of conversations, and what turned out to be a virtual connection, something we went ahead and connected even in person earlier last week. So when we were chatting throughout the year, one thing came up where Sahil was starting his audio podcasts, which kind of didn't go as well planned because LinkedIn Audio decided to shut down the audio podcast, and he was forced to start his video podcast, and it's been a rocker of the journey. So when he and I chatted, I said, "Why don't you join me rather for the podcast?" And he said, "Why? Why not?" And last weekend during my trip to Mumbai, we just discussed exactly all about that and a lot more. And let me tell you, it felt like we know each other for a long time. Moreover, when I reached home and showed the picture to my mom, her reaction was priceless. It's like, who is this Amitabh Bachchan? That was Sahil, and that remains Sahil, who has his 6 foot plus towering presence. But it's not just about his height, it's his energy, it's a personality, his insights, and a lot more. That's what we're going to discuss today. So, today in this finale, we will dive deep into Sahil's journey as well, but discuss matters that are really important for each one of us, our careers. So, buckle up for a conversation filled with wit, inspiration, and a lot of heart. So, Sahil, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Gopal. It's so kind of you to say so many nice things. It feels very nostalgic that going back to the post that you wrote about your dad. And that touched a chord. And I said, while I was following your work, many a times you wait for that moment where something clicks with you, something resonates. And from there to career shifts, I've seen your journey, and I must say it's an honor and privilege to be with you this evening, having a conversation with you. So thank you for having me over.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine. And I would say it's been a great journey so far, looking at what all you have accomplished. And we spoke about that. Similar journeys of having spent a large part of our careers in professional services firms and a lot more commonalities in terms of how careers happen there. So we'll talk all about that in just a bit. But let's get into a bit about you. Um, if someone goes to your LinkedIn profile, he sees a lot about who you are as a person. But even then, I would say there are aspects of you that you haven't probably shared with many. So if you were to introduce yourself to the guests that is who are listening in today, what would your intro be?
I wish I had asked you whether this is going to be the opening question, because honestly, I'm not prepared for it. But what I can definitely say is, karma has its own way of completing its circle. Being in HR, we have the privilege of asking this question to so many candidates, right? Please introduce yourself. Tell me about yourself. I never knew that someone's going to ask me the same question. But this, I don't have a scripted answer. But what I can definitely tell you is I'm a seeker. I'm someone who's extremely curious. Uh, Early on in my career, I was taught that a perspective or an answer or a point of view may not be the only point of view. And therefore, if you want to develop appreciation for other people's point of view, the best homework is to walk away from a conversation asking yourself that if there is an episode, there is a situation, you're in a challenging moment, you may have a default way of operating, right? Your natural style. But force yourself, push yourself, ask yourself that if I had to respond, react in a similar situation in three different manners, what would I do? And you'll be surprised to know that those three or those five or those 10 different responses or reactions would typically be of some other people in the room as well. And the moment you can push yourself to think that way, the fact that you will start appreciating someone else's point of view. Because then you're not hung up to the fact that this is the only right way to do it. And I think that one single learning that I received very early on in my career has personally helped me a lot to connect with people, to build a deeper level connection, to understand where people come from, and more importantly, to appreciate their individuality. So, if you want me to answer who's Sahil, Sahil is a person who is out there finding the human within human beings. Sahil is out there on a quest to get to know that alternate perspective. And Sahil is out there as a learner to learn from people, because I firmly believe every single human in this world knows at least one thing which I don't know. And if I can learn that thing holistically, I would be a better person. And in the process, also go back and share that with so many other people so that we complete the circle of life.
Very well said. And I can also say I have seen that in you quite a lot. There was one conversation, I don't know if you remember this, but there was one conversation, a LinkedIn audio live that we were both part of. And this was something to do with AI. And we exchanged a couple of WhatsApp texts during that. And I was like, it's so great to see you here. And we also spoke about what did you feel and what made you come and attend this one. And you said, I'm trying to learn a lot about AI and its applicability for my roles as well. And it's sometimes so good to hear some young folks speaking and doing things which are way beyond what you and I can imagine. So completely agree with that. I think curiosity is something that I have seen a lot in you, and I'm sure is one of the very important aspects for a lot of us in the professional realm. So thank you for that
Actually,
wonderful
Gopal,
intro.
yeah, Gopal, I actually
Yeah,
vividly remember that event that both of us had logged into. And I also remember the chat that we said that, hey, these 20-year-olds are
yeah,
actually telling us stuff that you and I have never heard of. And I'm sure all our listeners, all our followers would have attended 100 conferences or 100
yes,
seminars or 200 podcasts on AI, Gen AI, prompt engineering. It's all done and dusted, right? But
yeah,
the tools that we got introduced to, the manner in which those 20-year-old kids, unfortunately, I don't remember their names, but the way they were talking was fantabulous. And, we were exchanging notes to say, on one end, while AI may be a fad, or the flavor of the season or the latest emerging technology, we see a lot of people who talk so generic about generative AI. And here you had a bunch of people who were very passionate about AI, and they were actually giving us tips, use cases, tools. And I was saying, wow, at two ends of the spectrum, you can actually have someone who can go and stand on a stage and talk about AI and flap around and be so fluffy about it. And here you have someone who is day in and out practicing AI. And what better place to be than to be in that event and learn so much from those children? It was amazing.
absolutely. AI has been a topic of conversation on most of the episodes that I have had, and either ones that I attended or even the ones that I had done in my podcast. There is a lot more worry that comes when people talk about AI. There are aspects that are related to HR, which is about how do we automate stuff, which means jobs get cut, etc., etc., etc. Personally, have you been able to wrap your head around what AI has done to us, and what are your reflections of that of this year?
I had a slightly different perspective. I said, if every podcast you've spoken about AI, today let's not talk about AI. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something that you've not spoken so far, if
Hmm.
you're okay with that. Because
Yeah,
trust
sure.
me, yeah, because trust me, if everyone's spoken about AI, I don't want to be just another person adding to it, because I have no qualms in accepting that I am not an expert on AI. I'm also a student, and therefore I will say pretty much what most of your guests have already said. So I don't want to repeat what they've said. So let's
Perhaps
talk about,
yes.
yeah,
Absolutely. But has life changed for you after AI, like personally speaking?
personally, yes. Our life has changed significantly because I love doing social experiments. And
Hmm.
many a times, and I was discussing this at another college that I was some time ago, to say that we spoke about prompt engineering a short while ago, right? And many a times when you want quick outputs, we would put in stuff with lingo,
Yeah.
with jargon in the world of HR or psychology. And I was not very happy with the kind of output that I was getting. And then I asked my mom. I said, "Hey, mom, I want a output from Chat GPT, and this is what I want as an output." And I just left my phone with her, and you'll be amazed. The quality of output that I got was far, far better, and that immediately got me to go back and read what she had typed out as a prompt. And
Wow.
the learning that I had is that whenever a person is slightly distant from the subject, the person simplifies the ask. Many a
Hmm.
times we complicate what we want because we use jargon, because we use the terminology, because we try in our endeavor to be specific. But actually, the machine is looking for very simple words to give you the kind of output that you want. That was learning number one. Learning number two, many parts of our rules in professional services and otherwise have the penetration of AI. Uh, Many organizations I'm aware of are also building their own version of Gen AI in the context of data privacy. But more importantly, I think many people are also trying to say that, okay, is it really working in the manner in which I want it to work? Because what people are doing, the smart ones, especially the ones who I talk to, the ones who I meet, they very clearly understand that where the role of AI stops is where their role begins. So it's not about being in competition with AI. It's about saying
Right.
it's a great enabler, it's a great tool, it's great technology at my disposal. Now, how can I use it to be more effective? How can I use it to be more efficient? And at the end of the day, I give you a use case, right? There is no replacement to a face-to-face interview, is what I very firmly believe. You call it body language, you call
Absolutely.
it vibes, you call it being in the same space, you call it looking at gestures, whatever. But if I have 10,000 CVs that come and hit me, I can't, due to paucity of time, conduct 10,000 interviews. And therefore, can
Truly.
I leverage the power of AI to do matchmaking for me as far as jobs are concerned, right? And then let people swipe left or swipe right. And then I get the algorithm works for me in a manner in which I have an ATS friendly software, a resume, which is ATS friendly. It's on the algorithm. I have my skill sets out there. I have a job description. I have a CV. A matching happens, and I get a score of saying this candidate is 90% there. Now, the 95% match brings down 10,000 CVs to 50 CVs. Much more easier to do. So do the initial
Yeah.
steps, and of course, you will have exceptions where may have someone very talented but has not made an ATS friendly CV because the word match has not happened. So
Right.
how do you then factor in those exceptions in a very radical manner to ensure that you're very prudent, but at the same time you're meeting your objective of hiring? So I completely agree with you. AI has penetrated all industries, some more, some less, but let's use it as an enabler.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I like what you said about the fact that when there are 10,000 CVs, you can't, it's humanly impossible for one to sit and screen them. It also reflects the fact that one, we are living in a world where there is abundance, and you often look for choices in, let's say, if you want to buy a mobile, if you want to buy anything, you go and search on any social media platform or e-commerce platform, you will get choices that are abundant in nature. Today, even on LinkedIn and many other social media, there are a lot of people who are doing podcasts as well. So clearly, there is no dearth of choices. There are ways that you can still succeed and thrive. But in this world of abundance, there is also chaos. There is also clutter. There is also challenge in you being able to find the right one for yourself. How do you go about, like, what can people, and since my show is more about careers, individuals, what can they do? What can people do to find clarity in chaos?
I think that's a beautiful question. Finding clarity in chaos starts with self awareness.
Mm.
Are you clear what you want? Right? I'm not preaching to the choir, but all I'm saying is that when you are scrolling the Insta reels or the YouTube shots of the world, are you very clear that the 30 minutes that you spend, and today we have phones that give us analytics of how much time you spent on which app,
Yeah.
right? And that's so amazing because at the end of the week, I get a complete dashboard on where my time has gone
Yeah.
in terms of not just screen time, but app time, right?
Yeah.
Do I have that amount of clarity of if I have spent 15 hours in the last 1 week on Instagram, what is the output that I have received? And if I haven't received an output, is it meaningless? And I think once you have that level of self awareness and clarity, you will better be able to navigate and meander through the chaos. Otherwise, you become the chaos. Because all you're doing is feeding someone else's circular economy. That's all that you're doing. Very, very similar to careers as well. I think today I have a lot of people who reach out to me for career advice, officially, informally, and they want to move into different jobs, they want to move into different sectors, they want to try out different things, which is amazing on one end of the spectrum, because generations earlier, pivoting was very difficult. People would not take bets on people as much as someone is willing to take a bet on you today, right? Today, are you able to see the so many PR stunts that are happening to garner eyeballs versus what is genuinely a job request or requisition? And number three, if this is a genuine job request, in less than 200 words, are you able to articulate your value proposition rather than saying, I have a standard CV and let my CV do the talking? We've been talking about video CVs for so long. We've been talking about elevator pitches for so long. But many people, I can tell you, significantly struggle to make a 60-second CV for a relevant role that they're applying. And therefore, clarity is very important to say, I'm spending half an hour on Instagram, but I'm doing it for entertainment. Or I'm spending 1 hour on LinkedIn, but I have increased my followers. I have developed 10 new connections. And out of these 10 connections, in the beginning of 2024, hypothetically, I wanted to come on Career Shifts podcast. I'm in December 2024. I've finally made it, right? Whatever may be your goal, as long as you are very clear about it and therefore spending that time. I'm not saying do it with an ulterior motive. I'm saying have clarity. Throughout the journey, you may be misled. At times, you may lose your path, which is absolutely okay, as long as you course correct as you move along. So 3 ways to cut through the chaos with clarity. Number 1, self-awareness. Number 2, have an objective in mind and track results against the objective in terms of spending time like we discussed. And number 3, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, reflections are very important. Today, Gopal started with 4 goals. He's done well on 3. On health, he's not done quite well. I'm sure in January, he's going to have a 3-month plan for at least prioritizing health as number 1. Maybe he'll be successful, maybe he will not be. Time will tell us. But at least he has that clarity, which goes back to point number 1. So these are the 3 points that I have.
Wonderful. Sahil, as you were sharing your thoughts, I think one thing that kind of clearly came out was that the world of work has evolved quite a lot since the time when we started working. And the word work often was looked at as work is worship. That has changed. So aspects like loyalty is probably overrated in many contexts today. Personally, how has work changed for you? What does work in 2025 mean? And I'm not talking career, just work. What does work in 2025 mean to you?
Sure. There's a slight lag, and therefore I was trying to say, so instead of career shifts, we'll talk about work shifts, right? That's what you're asking. So how has work shifted, right? I'm still very, very old school as far as your question is concerned. So for me, work is still worship, right? You spoke about loyalty. My definition of loyalty has changed, but I still value loyalty, right? Earlier, loyalty meant being with an organization for 3 decades, 4 decades, retiring from the same organization where you started working, irrespective of performance, right? As long as you were there in highs and lows, the organization did well, you were around. We didn't do very well, you still continued being with the promoter or the owner. That was loyalty. My definition of loyalty in a Gen Z world or an alpha generation world or a millennial world is, as long as you are with the organization, Are you 100% with the organization? You may have a mandate that I'm joining an organization just for a period of 2 years, right? I was just meeting a very interesting person this morning who told me that she moved geographies and came back to India as part of caregiving to her elderly parents. And she joined an organization because the organization had a very specific challenge. And she said, I would love to crack this problem. I'm giving myself 1 year to see whether I can crack it or not. Now, to my mind, if I was the owner of that organization, I would say loyalty is equal to this person is equal to 1 year. Because in 1 year, if I have achieved everything that I wanted to achieve of that individual, I'm the happiest person. I don't need to associate loyalty with longevity. I need to associate loyalty with mandate. What is the reason why I'm bringing the person in? In what time frame is the person achieving the objective, and am I getting ROI? And is it a win-win for both parties? So that's my definition of loyalty. Let's talk about work. Work, of course, has been over-debated as far as the workplace is concerned, the workforce is concerned, and of course, the quality of work or work by itself has been looked at, right? Let's look at each dimension one by one. COVID enabled most organizations, if not all, of course, certain organizations had to be present there. You can't fly an aircraft working from home. But most organizations got the flexibility of working from anywhere, right? Which actually was amazing for Bharat, because everybody who came to India, which is the metros, went back to Bharat, went back to Ratlam, went back to Rourkela, went back to Ratnagiri, right? And everybody started working from there. Wi-Fi became amazing. People got connectivity. Those who didn't did a trade-off. They took their cars out, went to 2 kilometers away, would get at a friend's place, would get at another social place where they had great network, and they would work. So which means productivity didn't get impacted, but people found alternate ways. Metros got decongested. AQI went down. Pressure on the cities went down, right?
Yeah.
What came back was the old mindset of saying, if you're not sitting below my nose, if you're not in front of my cabin, if I don't see you, if I don't see for how long you go on a sutta break, I don't know whether you're working or not, right?
Yeah.
But yet you see many progressive organizations that are saying it doesn't matter where you are as long as I get the output. Some organizations still believe that you need to come back. So therefore, there is a divide on the mandate of where are you working from. But the harsh reality is that if you're going to spend 4 hours, 5 hours on travel, on commute, the question that we need to ask ourselves is it worth it? What is the ROI on traveling for 4 hours? Is it productive? Is it counterproductive? And if it is counterproductive, what mechanisms do you need to do, whether it is data security, whether it is work from anywhere, whether it is moonlighting, whatever may be your cons, how are you tackling it rather than saying, hey, come back to work, right? Now look at the workforce, right? The workforce is very simple, a manifestation of economics.
Yeah.
Demand and supply. That's the workforce of today. You saw during COVID times, it was an employees market. Every employee had 3 to 4 offers. Do you think employees didn't play foul? They played very foul, right?
Yeah.
And here again, I'm generalizing, right? For them, an increment was not based on their current compensation. An increment was based on the last offer that they had, and some of them had 5 to 6 offers, which means if I was sitting at 100 rupees, I have an offer of 600. I want a 40-50% jump on 600, which was like a bubble. That bubble had to burst sometime. And then you saw that with wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, 2022, 2023, these same people said, hey, I was at 100. I'm willing to join back at 100. I did a home run for these 2 years. I'm willing to come back at 100. Please hire me. Now it is an employer's market. Nobody wants to hire. These same people are sitting at home. right? So I very firmly believe the circle of life completes itself. Point number two. Point number three, come to think of a simple concept that today a 22-year-old in our country is earning 1 crore a month
Ooh,
just by content creation, just by podcasting, just by YouTubing. 1 crore a month. And you may say, Sahil, this is just one-off case. Agreed, one-off case. But you have many people who are earning a couple of lakhs a month. Many people in the content creation industry.
space. Yeah.
Therefore, what's the underlying point, Gopal? The underlying point is work is not equal to money. Earlier, I would join as an analyst, as an executive, as a senior executive, assistant manager, manager. I had a progression. With every progression, I would have an increment, I would have a promotion, I would make more money. And finally, I would say, hey, I got a cabin and now I got a corner office. Today, a 22-year-old is flying business class, sitting next to a CEO who is 55-year-old of a multinational organization and saying, hey, dude, what's up? Do you want to come on my podcast tomorrow? It'll help you build your personal brand. It'll help you build your personal brand. A 22-year-old is telling a 57-year-old, a CEO of a multinational organization. We're living in that world. We're living in a world where money is not equal to the work you do or the seniority you have. Now, when you de-link money from the equation, what are you going to replace as far as the work is concerned? You're going to replace what is worship now. Is worship purpose? Is worship passion? Is worship working with people who you love working with? Is worship flexibility? Everybody's definition of worship is
It's
changing.
different.
So,
Yeah.
Gopal, these are some of my thoughts. So I want to flip it back to you. What are your thoughts?
Incredible.
I
No,
knew you didn't
I
expect
completely agree. No. I mean, I completely agree with you in terms of the work's definition changing and also purpose being playing the more important part. And at the end of the day, I like what you said when it comes to we are now looking at impact, not so much about not so much about how many hours of work, but I have also been part of an ecosystem without naming where it was, where it still looks at work very differently, and where it is still about what would you do for 9 hours in a day, where it is still about how many files have you cleared in a day. So while I agree with a lot of what you said, I also have real experiences of how things don't move. And I really hope that that world evolves and changes to kind of start focusing on the outcomes and impacts. Because if we don't really work on that, we as a nation would kind of find ourselves in a situation where there will be a lot of work and very few workers. Not because there is no liking for work, it's because work will never find its way to workers, and workers would never find its way to work. And that's what is happening as we see and as we speak as well. So, yeah, fingers crossed on that one.
No, that's very true. And thank you for sharing that alternate perspective. You can still use the word workers now, but with the new act coming up, workers cannot be used as a word. But thank you, Gopal. I think thanks for sharing that alternate perspective, because there are always two sides to the spectrum, right? And you're damn
Absolutely.
right that if you don't really work at it, you will have a challenge with the times to come. So
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's talk about, a very interesting aspect of, the other word that keeps doing the rounds across all the conversations these days, and it almost seems like it's a fancy word, which is called a leader. Now, the definition of a leader has evolved, of course, over a period of several years. For me and a couple of others on who are chatting here, Prashant, Dr. Prashant Iyer, and Neha, thank you for joining in. We keep chatting about the fact that leaders are people like Abdul Kalam, who come with a specific vision, clarity, gravitas. And I'm sure we all have grown up watching leaders in our organizations. But in times like these, that word has lost its essence in many ways. Here we are in an organization which has young, dynamic, fantastic C suite professionals. But there is also a saying that everything comes with experience too. Now, that experience need not be as long as 20 years, but it could be um, valuable as well. What are your views on how this is going to span out in the next few years or probably a decade with the multi-generational reality that we are living in? You are going to have leaders across, and you will have, like as you rightly said, you have a 22-year-old CEO and a 57-year-old CEO sitting next to each other and calling each other on their podcast. But the reality in many corporates is that it's a hard challenge to break. So in this situation, what do leaders need to do to reinvent themselves?
I think yours is a very loaded question. So I'm going to
Yeah,
try and demystify it a bit,
sure.
because it's important to simplify this, right? I think three or four perspectives here. Perspective number one, I'm a firm believer of situational leadership, right?
Hmm.
So at any point in time, not everybody has to be good at everything. A certain situation may demand a certain skill set. And while people with gray hair, and I'm getting a lot of them in the last couple of years, I don't know why, but so people with gray hair will definitely have seen more Diwalis than people who are in their 20s. So that's no taking away from that, right? But does it also mean that people who've grayed their hair or have been out in the sun know more than what a guy sitting in a cafe, a 19-year-old jamming away knows? The answer is no. So a
No.
19-year-old can also know more than a 40, 50-year-old who has a lot of gray hair, right? So that's
Yeah.
the paradigm we are dealing with. Now, within this paradigm, is there mutual respect for each other? To say
Hmm.
that in this situation, with this skill set, I think that it is going to be amazing for
Yeah.
this person to lead the team. Versus in this
Yeah.
situation, I think it is amazing for this person to lead the team. Now, this brings up
Yeah.
a big problem. And the big problem that this brings up is the problem of hierarchy. Is it easy
Yeah.
for people to deal with their insecurities? Is it easy for people to deal with their egos? Is it easy for people to go out there and tell the world that I am being led by a person who's just passed out from Harvard, or for that matter, any school, and knows a lot more than me on this subject? So, are we able to even fathom, let alone go and pronounce it, right? And therefore, what's going to happen is you will see that gone are the days. And in fact, I just saw, Nia's comment on people filling timesheets as well, right? Or people actually doing a swipe in and a swipe out, and attendance being measured on biometrics. Or a lot of organizations today are doing geotagging if you're going to be on the field to say, tell me, did you go to this person's place? Did you go there? Did you do that? Right?
Yeah.
Now, how much of India Inc. is going to work on trust as a factor, and how much of it is going to work on monitoring? Because
Hmm.
this is also going to significantly impact. See, today, a lot of people are stuck in the what I call not the rat race, but the rut race. Right? It's the rut to say, अभी शादी करनी है, अभी एक EMI लेना है, अभी EMI को पे करना है, और वो किस्तें देते 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 आपकी पूरी जिंदगी निकल जाती है, right? So when you get stuck in that rut, when you get stuck so
Hmm.
badly in that rut, even though you may want to escape it and live a better quality life, a free life, something on your own, today there are so many people who put their hands up saying, I don't want a 6, 7 digit salary. I'm okay with a decent salary, which makes my job fine, but I want to enjoy my life. I want to have a better quality life. And therefore, the question of leadership, to my mind, is to do with authentic leadership and situational leadership, right? As long as you can play that out, you will see that the world will become a better place. Corporate India will become a place where people will enjoy their work a lot more because they will get to taste leadership a lot more earlier on rather than waiting for that CXO title or that certain level of seniority before they start tasting leadership. And leadership doesn't need to be a word that we call as sacrosanct. I think leadership could be leadership in the moment as well. It could be based on a function as well. It could be based on a skill set as well. Today, Gopal, imagine, right? I've been doing audio podcasts, you spoke about it, and I had never done a video podcast. In 15 minutes, I learned so much from you. So for me, for my first video podcast, Gopal Iyer was the one who taught me in 15 minutes, Sahil, these are the four things you need to look at. Very simple, no rocket science, but look at this comments, look at this. There's a private chat. This is how you can connect your YouTube. This is how you can connect your LinkedIn. In that moment, Gopal, for me, you were a leader because you taught me something I didn't know. You helped me navigate in the last minute because LinkedIn pulled off their audio events. I had to navigate. I had to move to a video event, and you helped me out. So any person who helps open doors is a leader. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. No, incredible. And I think as I reflect on, I like what you said about being situational and authentic. Um, Two of them are often, I feel, grossly limited in terms of how people use. Authenticity is a rare virtue, and situational leadership requires you being mindful as well. And a lot of people are so busy in their busyness, it kind of makes it difficult to be situational leader too. But yeah, let's see how world evolves, and I'm sure gonna see a lot more of this evolve as times come.
Yeah. I think
Let's talk about,
also Gopal, you spoke about the
yeah,
whole concept of being busy, right? I think that's a very good point that you raised.
yeah,
Gone are the days where you could um, pretend being busy because being busy is no longer equal to being productive. And
yeah,
organizations that are measuring output
yeah,
don't really factor in as much of the input. And therefore, you could be working an hour, 2 hours a day. But as long as you're getting the output, the question is, how are you utilizing the remaining couple of hours to either influence others, build new leaders, make a difference, so on and so forth, right? So I love the concept that you spoke about of being busy is not equal to being productive or creating value.
agree, agree. We've heard this phrase called culture eats strategy for breakfast, which talks about the real importance of culture in every organization. So, while a lot of focus goes into building cultures, I personally believe that every individual who works in an organization also is equally responsible for building that culture. What are some of the, I would say, if you have a point of view on that, of what someone getting into an organization could do uh, to improve the organizational culture? Do you have any views on whether it could be someone joining in new, it could be someone who is laterally moving from another organization as well?
Sure. So, 3 points here once again. First point is every organization has a culture, which is basically, to my mind, a set of behaviors, right? It has to boil down to behaviors. On behaviors, what you generally see is what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And the third most important point is what do you do with people who display non-acceptable behaviors?
Mm,
Because if you don't do anything with them, then the whole attitude and the culture becomes chalta hai attitude, right?
I
Many a
love it.
times we see this in microcultures that are part of an organization. Many a times we see this with powerful people who override or allow such cultures to exist. And many times we also see that because certain behaviors of certain people are so toxic, it has a ripple effect on not just their immediate team, but also the brand, the organization, and the overall culture, because you are allowing it to perpetrate. And therefore, what is very important is to ensure that if you have called out positive indicators and negative indicators, you can't be a watchdog as HR. You can't be a moral police. That's not your job. But what is important is that even if the lowest person in the entire rung, or the highest person, or the weakest person, or the strongest person observes a negative behavior and you see it happening repeatedly, is there a psychologically safe space in that organization where a person can go and report it without the fear of any consequences? And if that happens, you will realize that people will not even need to report it over a period of time. Because if there is great trust, I can simply walk up to you and say, "Hey, Gopal, at that office party, you passed this really sad joke, and honestly, I didn't like it." Right? It may have been fun. You may have been a couple of drinks down. I may have been a couple of drinks down. But Gopal, I don't appreciate it. Next time, please don't do it. And that so-called conflict ends there itself. But if I am not even comfortable talking to you, I'm going to first go and bitch about you to 5 people. And 5 people will give 5 more examples of, yeah, Gopal did this with me also. Oh, yeah, Gopal asked a joke about me. Who does he think he is? Oh, we need to set him right. And when people start thinking, oh, we need to set him right, then it becomes a water cooler conversation, a corridor conversation. It becomes gossip to say, "Arey yaar, ye aisa hi hai." It may have been just one instance that could have got solved just by Sahil having a conversation with Gopal. But it snowballs into something because that's the culture that I am creating as an individual. And when that culture as an individual goes to a team level and it is not corrected, then it gets to an organization level. So therefore, it's very, very important to have negative indicators and to call them out.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think that's what makes it even more important. And unfortunately, also, we have reached a stage where having a great culture is almost seems like a luxury, but it's a necessity. Sahil, coming to a very common favorite topic of us, one that connects us, the topic of HR. So while the world has moved as fast as it has, I was talking to Dr. TV Rao a couple of weeks ago on the 25th episode. He's, of course, seen it all as how things have evolved, from how HR was in the 70s to what it is today. Yet, HR, even today, has been, labeled in many other ways that it probably doesn't deserve it to be. There is definitely scope for us to do more. But if there were to be an advice that you're giving to a young HR professional, what can 1, 2, or 3 things you can do differently to, set yourself up in your career? What would that be?
I think I'll just restrict it to one, and hopefully this is powerful enough. In many countries, they request you to serve the country before you go and start your life out, right? I think that's the simple advice that I would give any HR person. Please go and spend some time in business. It could be marketing, it could be finance, it could be sales, it could be whatever is your main line of business. Spend minimum 2 years in business, because that is when not only will you understand the business language, not only will you understand the lingo, but more importantly, you will also understand the pain points.
Yeah.
So when you come up with an policy, when you come up with the HR plan, when you come up with an HR strategy, when you come up with an intervention, you will not think basis just your HR knowledge. You will think of that end analyst sitting there in front of a terminal. You will think of that sales guy sitting at 42 degrees selling that soap who you're saying, hey, complete 100 hours of training, right? You will think of someone else out there in R&D. You will think of that person who is in crime investigation, who is out there trying to detect a crime. So whatever may be your industry, please spend a minimum of 1 to 2 years in business, because that is exactly when you will understand the business. And when you understand
Yeah.
the business, your ability to make policies, procedures, interventions will be a lot more effective rather than just applying your HR knowledge. So that's my only, I don't think I'm qualified to give advice, but that's my only suggestion to everyone out there. And it's never too
No,
late.
I
You
hear
don't
you.
need to do that as
Yeah,
a
yeah, it's never too late.
you can do it mid-career. You can do it if you're a senior. You can do it as a head of. I know so many people who have been heading HR and today have also picked up roles in business, right? In addition to their HR role, some people have even transitioned to business, right? But I would say
Yeah.
for every person out there, you want to get into HR, spend 1 2 years in business. And therefore, many organizations have what they call as the management training program, where you spend 3 months in every function. I think that's too less. A minimum a year or two before you make a full-fledged career in HR.
Yeah. No, wonderful. Anusudan says, great suggestion, Sahil. I agree. I mean, ever since I moved out of functional HR role in 2019, my career, my life, my outlook towards work in HR has changed drastically. And there's so much of empathy that we have for the business and the functions that we work with. So, with you on that. So,
Yeah.
Sahil,
Gopal, I just think very simply, Gopal, I think
yes,
two things are very important to be successful.
yeah, yeah,
आपको धंधा समझ में आना चाहिए और आपको बंदा समझ में आना चाहिए. When I say banda, I mean all genders, right? So don't just say, oh, he's talking
yeah,
only about guys. Just talent, right?
yeah,
Talent. तो
yeah,
अगर आपको
talent,
धंधा
yeah,
समझ में आएगा और बंदा समझ में आएगा, you're a rock star. Now, many a
yeah,
times what happens with HR people, because they've done psychology or they've done HR or they understand the law of the land, आपको बंदा तो अच्छे से समझ में आ जाता है. You can hire someone very quickly, you can train the person, you can upskill the person, you
mm,
can get a great ESOP plan basis the life stage of the person. But आपको धंधा नहीं समझ में आ रहा है. तो अगर आप धंधा समझ जाओ और आप बंदा समझ जाओ, you will be a lethal combination for any organization as a super asset.
wonderfully said. I don't think I could have done justice to that, what you just said. So, thank you on that part, Sahil. A last question, which is a personal reflection for you. What would Sahil do differently in 2025?
I think Sahil would do three things differently in 2025. Number one, Sahil will definitely, and this is a commitment I'm making on your show, Career Shifts, I am going to shift gears. I think it's
Oh,
time for Sahil to shift gears, right? I don't know about top drive or not, but I will definitely shift gears, right?
wonderful.
Second, I think Sahil will make an attempt to be a lot more genuine. I think that's very important, right?
Mm,
Many a times we say this, and the conviction with what you say, comes from a lot of, Sadhguru calls it inner engineering. I would just call it
yeah,
going with it, right?
yeah.
So I think if I can do that, I think I would be a more holistic person. And
Mm,
third, I say this many a times, but I think I need to also practice it a lot more, is a congruence or drawing a straight line between here, here, and here. What
wow.
you think, what you say, and what you feel. It's very beautiful to say it. आप क्या सोच रहे हो, आप क्या बोल रहे हो, और आप क्या महसूस कर रहे हो, वो एक चीज होना चाहिए. हम सब
Mm,
कभी ना कभी कोई ना कोई सिचुएशन में सोचते कुछ और हैं, बोलते कुछ और हैं, फील कुछ और करते हैं.
करते कुछ.
I'm going to try my best. I'm just going to try my best to reduce this gap. I don't think I've been very successful in 2024 to reduce this gap. So 2025 is going to be about reducing this gap.
Wonderful. You reminded me of the dialogue from Agnipath. आदमी बोलता कुछ है, सोचता कुछ है और करता कुछ है. So goes back to the towering personality of Sahil. Quickly, a quick rapid fire. If Sahil had an option to choose between mountain and beaches, what would Sahil choose?
Mountains, hands down.
And which one to be specific?
Oh, I think, India is so beautiful, incredible India. And I think if you've not done it, please do the Manali-Leh highway. It is one of the best roads I have ever been on. You will get a cold desert, you'll get mountains, you will get, you name it. And I think that road is so beautiful. It just humbles you in ways beyond measure, right? It just helps you realize that nature is so powerful. And anytime that you think that the world exists because of you, trust me, get onto a motorbike and get onto that road. And when you hit Magnetic Hill and when you hit Khardungla Pass and when you go to all parts of Nubra Valley and travel all across Pangong Lake, you will realize that we are just a speck in the ocean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One word that describes you.
Sorry, Gopal, you're frozen. You're frozen, Gopal.
Yeah, one word that describes you. One
Seashore.
word that describes you.
Seashore.
Seashore. Is that why? Because you're from Mumbai? Or?
No. Sahil means seashore.
Seashore,
so,
yes.
Kinara.
Yes.
Kinara.
Your go-to comfort food?
Food? It depends which city I'm in. If I'm in Kolkata, it's puchka. If I'm in Mumbai, it's pav bhaji. If I'm in Delhi, it's chole bhature.
Lovely. A career mantra you live by?
There is no substitute to hard work, but you should know when to do smart work.
Lovely. And a book that you would recommend to all the listeners today?
I think I've just, an hour before this podcast, I just got back home and a very close friend of mine, Sundar, sent me a book that he's written along with a co-author of his called Head Start. And I was just browsing through the broad topics and I think it was very, very well written. And for everybody out there who has just started their career or mid-career and wants to know more about their career, I haven't read the entire book. It's just come an hour ago. But the topics that I've read in the index sound very, very fascinating. So I would recommend that as my latest read, Head Start.
Lovely, lovely. Sundar and I had spoken, and we'll see if I can get him on the podcast soon. So both Vivek and Sundar. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
It's a very relevant topic. Yeah, relevant topic and very, very well aligns with what we are here doing as well. So lovely, Sahil. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your perspectives. I love the conversation. Any parting thoughts that you have for the listeners today?
I think everybody out there, the 1st of January is a very beautiful day. 31st, we make a lot of promises. On the 1st, we try and implement some of them. On the 2nd, we forget them. My only request would be pick up just one thing. You don't need to make a list of 20 New Year resolutions. Pick up just one thing. And I said 3 today. Maybe I will also just pick up one. But if we can pick up one and do it so rock solid well, imagine if Gopal and I just met and we were competing that my stomach is bigger than his stomach and we were doing all of that. But imagine if Gopal had to pick up just his health. And if you saw him on Career Shifts in December 2025 as a lean, mean machine, that would be the biggest happiness that I would ever experience, saying Gopal said something and Gopal did it, right? And I think each one of us, everyone knows their own story, but if all of us can pick up just one thing that really matters the most to us, and if we do it, it's not about showing the world, it's about your own self. And I think pick
Yeah.
up one thing, but do it so rock solid well, with consistency, with dedication, with passion. And I'm sure that will be very, very fulfilling for each one of you.
Lovely. We all need accountability partners. So now that you have said that, let's
I'm
compete.
going to call you. I'm going to call you every week. I'm going to call you. Send me a picture of the weighing scale.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Lovely, Sahil. Really appreciate you taking the time. And to all of you who are joining live and listening to us talk, and people who are going to listen to this later through other channels, thank you. Thank you for being part of this incredible journey, not just today, but throughout the year. Whether you have been with us since episode 1 or you've joined us just today, your presence, support, engagement has shaped Career Shifts podcast into what it is today, which is a space for connection, inspiration, and meaningful conversations. As we wind down the year this time, it's a moment for reflection. 2024 for sure has been year of challenges, growth as well, and unexpected surprises. For me, I've had some amazing experiences of speaking to wonderful guests on my podcast, but it also has been year of personal losses. Something that doesn't come a lot easy or doesn't become easy for a lot of people. Each conversation for me, even then, has been a privilege, a chance to learn from extraordinary journeys, and including today's episode with Sahil. Now it's time to pause, recharge, and take stock. I'll be taking some time off. And as we close the year out, I'll return in 2025 with newer guests, fresher perspectives, and emerging themes that resonate with all of us. Next year, we will continue to explore the evolving workspace, dive deeper into personal growth as well, and bring actionable insights from people to thrive in the uncertain world. So, from power of storytelling to strategies of navigating career, 2025 will be filled with more inspiration, insight, and wisdom. As you prepare for the new year, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on your own journeys. Ask yourself, what went well this year? What could have been better this year? And what will I experiment in 2025? For me, it's going to be health for sure. Careers rarely are linear. They're shaped by experiments we undertake, the failures we face, and stories we create along the way. It's not just about reaching a destination, it's about growing, contributing, and staying true to your values while embracing the inevitable twists and turns. Thank you once again for making this year so special for me. Your support has been invaluable, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you in the new year. Until then, stay curious, what Sahil said, stay motivated, that both of us are saying, and keep experimenting. Keep following the Career Shifts podcast on LinkedIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and listen to the conversations that matter. Wishing you all a very happy new year in advance. See you in 2025. Let's keep evolving and moving upwards. Thank you so much.